Ever had someone at a wedding think they could steal your partner right in front of you? That was Daisy. She laughed, she flirted. She touched him like he was hers. And my fiancé didn't even notice. But by the end of the night, I made sure she got the sweetest lesson she'd never forget. If you've ever felt powerless while someone crossed the line with your loved one, hit that like button and subscribe. Because this story of petty, satisfying revenge is about to show you exactly how I turned the tables, and trust me, it's deliciously petty. I always thought I was lucky when it came to love. My fiancé, let's call him Max, is honestly one of the most amazing people in the universe. He's smart, funny, kind, and completely loyal. I know that sounds like the perfect fiancé cliché, but it's true. He bakes me cookies when I'm sad, brushes my hair when I'm down, and somehow manages to make me laugh even on the worst days. But even Max has one flaw. He's socially oblivious. Like painfully oblivious. I'm pretty sure he's somewhere on the autism spectrum, because the man cannot read subtle cues to save his life, and that's usually fine. But it became a problem when Daisy entered the picture. Daisy is a coworker of Max's. She's in her late 30s, sharp, attractive, and clearly thinks Max is the hottest man alive. And honestly, I don't blame her. He's tall, brilliant, funny, and has this gentle charm that draws people in. But the way Daisy acted around him, it was like watching a teenager with a crush for the first time. She twirled her hair, giggled at everything he said, and somehow always found a way to sit right next to him. Once she even reached over and rested her hand on his knee. I noticed it immediately. My stomach would knot up every time she did something a little too forward. I'd watch Max lean away subtly, trying to escape her touch. But he never seemed to get the bigger picture. And when I mentioned it to him, he made this face like gross, and promised he'd keep his distance, but I could tell he didn't really know how to deal with it. Here's the thing, I trust Max completely. He's never given me a reason not to. We work from home, we spend all day together every day, and I have full access to his accounts and phone. He's not secretive, he's not a flirt, and he would never encourage this behavior. He's genuinely devoted to me and I know it. But that didn't stop me from feeling a burning mix of frustration and amusement every time Daisy tried to insert herself into our lives. We had moved across the country a couple of years ago, which meant we didn't really have a solid friend group here yet. Max's coworkers became like his little family. They'd meet for drinks every month and I'd sometimes tag along. Daisy would always try to claim the best spots at the table, positioning herself next to Max, laughing at every word he said, leaning in just slightly too close, and I would sit there quietly watching, my hands gripping my cup, feeling a mix of disbelief and irritation. It wasn't that I wanted drama. I'm a chill person. I don't enjoy confrontation. But seeing someone flirt so blatantly, knowing that Max didn't even notice, made something inside me shift. I didn't want to yell at Daisy or Max, and I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted, well, let's just say I wanted justice. Petty, sweet, satisfying justice. And as the week of our wedding approached, that little thought began to grow. Daisy had no idea, but she was walking into a situation where her ego and her overconfidence would meet a perfectly subtle, delicious twist. Because Max may not notice much, but I notice everything. And I was about to make sure that for once, Daisy realized she couldn't play games with us without consequences. As the wedding drew closer, the excitement and nerves were in full swing. Planning a small, intimate wedding of about 35 people should have been simple. But of course, life never makes things easy, especially when someone like Daisy exists. Max and I had been carefully arranging every detail. We wanted it personal, heartfelt, and just a little bit magical. Part of that meant catering to everyone's needs. A few guests were gluten intolerant, including Daisy, so we went out of our way to find a boutique bakery that specialized in safe, high-quality gluten-free cupcakes. Literally the best in the province, according to one friend with celiac disease who's very particular about her food. These cupcakes weren't just a dessert. They were a statement that every guest mattered. We asked everyone which flavor they preferred, chocolate or caramel. Everyone went with chocolate, except Daisy. She, of course, requested caramel. She never liked chocolate. I double-checked just to be sure, and yes, she had 0 allergies to chocolate. It wasn't about safety. It was about preference, about asserting her little bubble of control. And it made me laugh quietly to myself, thinking about how meticulous she was about her own tastes while acting like she owned Max's attention. But the cupcake situation wasn't the only red flag. Through some overheard whispers and group messages, I discovered Daisy's next move. She was planning to wear white to the wedding. Not an off-white, not ivory, actual white. The color reserved for me, the bride. And her +1 friend was planning to wear beige. At first I couldn't believe it. Was she really this bold? The audacity. I texted Max immediately, half in disbelief and half in a panic. "She can't be serious, right?" I wrote. And true to form, Max's response was blunt and decisive. "He can't be serious, right?" I wrote. And true to form, Max's response was blunt and decisive. "What a fucking asshat," he said. He didn't even hesitate. He straight up told me he'd shut that nonsense down immediately if it came to it. No white. Any shade, she shows up in white, she doesn't get in. Max's reaction made me laugh and relieved me at the same time. He's generally oblivious, yes, but when it comes to standing up for us, he's laser-focused. Daisy might have thought she could subtly undermine the wedding or draw Max's attention, but he wasn't about to let that happen. I had a moment of pause, thinking about whether we should just uninvite her entirely. Max considered it, but I knew that would cause drama with the rest of the friend group. Our friends are lovely, but gossip spreads like wildfire. I suggested a different approach. Let her show up if she dared, but make sure the rules were enforced politely. Maybe even enlist some friends to keep an eye out and, humorously, shower her in red wine if she overstepped. I was calm on the surface, but inside I was grinning at the thought. And yet, as I went back to placing the cupcake order, a small idea sparked in my mind. A little pettiest revenge I could pull off without confrontation. Daisy had requested caramel, but I realized I could make all the cupcakes chocolate. She wouldn't get her preferred flavor. She would have to eat chocolate like everyone else. I didn't even need to explain myself. It was subtle, quiet, and perfectly harmless, except for the fact that it would frustrate her to no end. I felt a thrill of satisfaction imagining the moment. Daisy, expecting her special caramel, only to be confronted with chocolate. The audacity of her planning, the expectation that she could control the room, and the subtle sting of disappointment she would feel. It was almost poetic. The wedding wasn't here yet, but the stage was set. Daisy was already primed for a small but undeniable reality check. And all the while, Max remained blissfully unaware of the cupcake twist, focusing on keeping the wedding joyful and drama-free. I felt a surge of quiet pride knowing that I was handling the Daisy problem, in the way that only a master of petty justice could. Little did she know, the wedding week wasn't just about vows, flowers, and guests. It was about karma served in chocolate, and Daisy had no idea she was about to get a very sweet lesson. By the time the wedding week arrived, my excitement had mixed with a quiet, mischievous anticipation. The cupcakes had been ordered, the flowers arranged, and the small, intimate guest list finalized. Every little detail was in place, but my mind kept drifting to Daisy. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she could waltz into our wedding, flaunt her outfit, demand her caramel cupcake, and maybe, just maybe, catch Max's attention. The thought made me chuckle. She had underestimated both of us, and that's when revenge tastes the sweetest. The venue was glowing with soft lights, pastel flowers, and the faint smell of vanilla and roses. Everything looked like a dream, calm, elegant, and just a little surreal. I was in the middle of getting my makeup done when one of my bridesmaids peeked into the room, a sly grin on her face. "She's here," she whispered. Of course, I didn't need to ask who. Daisy had arrived. I took a deep breath, half nervous, half thrilled. "What's she wearing?" The bridesmaid bit back a smile. Off-white blouse, beige skirt. She tried it. I almost laughed out loud. So predictable. Daisy had clearly thought she'd found a loophole. Not exactly white, but close enough to make a statement. The attention seeker in her couldn't resist. But what she didn't expect was Max. By the time the evening wound down, everything had fallen into place exactly as I had hoped. The ceremony had been intimate and beautiful, filled with laughter, happy tears, and the kind of heartfelt moments that stick with you forever. Max was radiant, glowing with happiness, completely himself, and utterly devoted to me. I couldn't have asked for a better day, or a better partner. Daisy, on the other hand, had quietly learned her lesson. She had survived the dress code enforcement without incident, but her little attempt to stand out and steal, attention had been diffused almost, entirely without her realizing it. And then there were the cupcakes. She had expected caramel, something special and personal, only to find chocolate, the flavor she didn't like. The tiny, subtle disappointment played out in her expressions like a secret performance only I could appreciate. She laughed politely, made small talk and moved on. But I caught every flicker of surprise, frustration and resignation in her eyes. It was glorious in the quietest, sweetest way. Daisy's planned white blouse and her friend's beige outfit would not fly. I could already imagine her attempting to negotiate, maybe pouting or joking, and Max staying firm, completely shutting her down. I felt a thrill imagining the social awkwardness she would experience. What I loved most about this plan was how it was entirely my little secret. I didn't have to confront her, argue, or make a scene. The world would think it was coincidence, that life had naturally handed her a small setback. But I knew the truth. I had orchestrated it quietly, perfectly, and with a flair for subtle satisfaction. I started telling myself little stories, rehearsing the scene in my head. Daisy walking over, reaching for her caramel cupcake, only to find chocolate. Her tiny gasp, the forced polite smile, and the whispered complaints to her friend. The little furrow of her brow, the silent realization that not everything would go her way. I could practically taste the satisfaction. By this point, I had to admit, I was enjoying this more than I probably should. But that's the beauty of petty revenge. It doesn't have to be cruel or malicious. It just has to be satisfying, perfectly timed, and delivered with finesse. And I had it all planned out. Daisy had no idea she was about to face her first little lesson in humility. And all I had to do was sit back, sip my drink, and enjoy the show. Little did Daisy know, the cupcakes were just the beginning. The wedding day would unfold perfectly, and every tiny, overconfident move she made would be quietly countered. By the time the night ended, she would realize, without me saying a word, that she had been outmaneuvered. And the best part? I would have watched it all unfold, savoring every subtle reaction, and knowing that justice, sweet, chocolate justice, had been served. The morning of the wedding felt like someone had turned the whole world up a few decibels. The air smelled faintly of lilies and espresso. Sunlight slid across the venue's wooden floor like warm honey. My hands were steady, only my heart kept skipping little. Nervous beats, but beneath the calm I'd worn all week there was a fizzing, guilty sort of excitement. Today was the day. Today was also the day I would finally see whether my tiny, ridiculous plan worked. Guests arrived in polite clusters, hugged, laughed, and handed me tiny presents wrapped in tissue paper. Max moved through the crowd with that gentle, stunned smile of his, checking that the playlist was right, that the groomsmen had their boutonnieres set. He was in his element, awkward, earnest, completely himself. Watching him made the nervousness fade into something softer, more like warmth. And then Daisy arrived. She came with her +1, a woman who indeed favored light neutrals, a pleasant contrast to Daisy's deliberate brightness. I watched them from across the room. Daisy in a blouse that was close to white, if not technically full wedding gown white, more like a daring, borderline ivory, and beige trousers that caught the light. She walked in as if on a stage, shoulders back, eyes searching the room for the person she wanted to own. For a second, old irritation flared like a match, Max noticed. He caught my eye and gave a small, almost private nod, a signal that said, "I told them." He didn't create a scene. He never would. Instead, he crossed the room with the mild fury of someone who can't stand rudeness. "Hey," he said politely but firmly. "Sorry, we had a dress request. Anything white or very light is off limits tonight." Daisy blinked, smiled a practiced smile, and muttered something about misunderstanding. She adjusted her blouse like the tiniest crease had betrayed her. I felt a little thrill. Max had handled it beautifully. He'd set a boundary without theatrics, and Daisy had to swallow the annoyance. I caught her eye for a moment. She gave me a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. There was a flash of something, miscalculation. Maybe. And then she moved on, scanning for a plate. The cupcakes sat on a low table near the dessert station, wrapped in a display that smelled like warm cocoa and butter. I moved through the crowd with a glass of champagne, the bubbles pricking the back of my throat, and watched, almost imperceptibly, as people circled and helped themselves. The sun from the windows hit the frosting and made it gleam like tiny polished moons. Daisy drifted toward the table. Her movement was purposeful, like a cat choosing a warm spot. My chest tightened in anticipation, ridiculous and childish, but real. She leaned in, brows furrowing slightly, scanning, calculating. For a second I thought she might laugh it off, pretend it was nothing. Then she reached out, plucked a cupcake, and lifted it under the light. Chocolate. Dark, smooth chocolate. The corner of her mouth tightened. She set it back down, hesitated, then picked one up again with a small, forced smile. She nibbled the edge as if inspecting a foreign language, eyes flicking toward her friend for validation. A whisper. A small, embarrassed huff. She put the cupcake down and moved away, face a little pinched, like she'd bitten into something unexpectedly sour. I felt a warmth spread through me that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite triumph. It was softer. Complicated, like someone who'd just watched a bully trip and felt the world briefly make sense. Around me, guests chatted, unaware of the tiny drama that had just played out. To anyone else, it was a simple table of desserts. To me, it was a scene I'd set, quietly, and watched unfold. Later, Daisy tried to make a pretense of nonchalance. She joked about being the only one who didn't love chocolate, threw a laugh like confetti, and even complimented the catering staff. But even as she talked, there was a tautness in her jaw, a slight avoidance when her voice brushed mine. She kept glancing at Max as if hoping for a glance back that would redeem the evening. Max, bless him, was present but unflappable, distracted by last-minute toasts and the ribbon on a boutonniere. He didn't notice the tiny chess move I'd made at the dessert table. He had better things to notice. Our life about to begin. The wedding ended perfectly. Daisy quietly learned her lesson. Max and I shared a private satisfaction, and the subtle, chocolate-laced revenge was complete. Sometimes the sweetest victories are the quietest.